I want to start this talk with a question to all of you. And my question is, what does intimacy mean to you? In your body, not what have you heard about it, what have you seen on screen, or what have you read, but what does intimacy mean to you in your body, in this life experience that you've had? And in order to access this, I'm going to invite you to try and remember or think about a person from your own life, a person who you really love to go to sleep with or wake up next to. And this could be a grandparent that you slept next to as a child. This could be a pet, a parent, a sibling, a life partner, a friend whose house you crash at very often. Okay? So once you've thought of this person, I want you to take a deep breath and sink into your chair, plant your feet on the ground, and just try to relive that feeling of sleeping next to them. The warmth of their body, maybe the smell of them that gets onto you, maybe also the awkward bits, like, you know, when they pull your blanket away, or when suddenly this arm comes and lands on your face. All of that stuff that we experience when you sleep next to somebody. Now, I want you to think about and notice the sensations and the feelings in your body as you relive this memory. Take a moment, spend a moment with your body as you remember. Once you start to feel this in your body, in the interest of time, I'm going to ask you to come back. And I'm going to show you these images. These images are from my work, Rorschach Touch, which is an intimate, immersive movement theater piece created upon these wonderful performers whose bodies have been my long-time collaborators, where my research has really come from. Now, what you just felt when you remembered your person and what you see in these images are the very definition of intimacy that I have encountered in my work. This being able to really feel into another person, this being able to receive or be received by another. This feeling of being so safe with this other person that you can laugh or cry in their presence. You can drop the facade, drop the mask. You can zone out and ask for your space. You can fall asleep. And very often, our intimate others are those people who invite the little child within us back into the room. Or those people who invoke a great tenderness in us, that we want to sometimes treat them like they're a little child. You know, when you pinch the cheeks of a grown adult, that feeling. My name is Diya Naidu. I'm a choreographer and I'm a dancer. And since about 2014, I've been researching intimacy in the context of touch. Now, I feel like because we are sitting in the presence of academia and medical students, I have to qualify this word research. Artistic research is not always empirically data-driven as much as, say, scientific research is, but it is embodied in that it comes to us, the information comes through the body very often. It's archived in the body. It is collective because very often, given our art psychology, artists actually have to come together and take joint ownership in order for the research to sustain long term. And it is very often anecdotal, which means that we get our information from interviews and stories and conversations. And after a lot of assimilation and observation and investigation, we offer you a subjective experience, not really a declaration of fact and non-fact, but an invitation. And in our case, this invitation comes in the form of a performance and a workshop. It feels like we've reached a place in popular culture where it's common knowledge that intimacy is a physiological need, that it is a tool for joyful and healthy living, and that it's a social superpower. Now, I'm here today with an additional proposition. And my proposition is that intimacy is a tool for resistance. When I say resistance, I imagine you're thinking of, right? Or now the dancer's body knows about the marriage of opposites in the physical realm. In order to go up, I must go down. In order to go outward, I must first go inward. So, what I'm here to talk about is this intimate service, this inner movement that maybe you are willing to do in order to push outwards, first the inner, then the pushing outwards, against whatever it is that you've picked as your battle, be it patriarchy or capitalism or casteism or gender discrimination. So here's how embodiment is a prerequisite for intimacy. I want to talk about an example of fast fashion, retail obsession, and stress eating. Very often, you would have encountered these terminologies, and some would say these are symptoms of the capitalist world that we have curated for ourselves. Capitalism and consumerism, in my learning, benefit from disembodiment. And being embodied is to really live in the body, to live through the body, to have this awareness that our imagination, our sensations, our feelings, our decisions are all happening through and in the body. It's very natural when you're upset or stressed to want to soothe yourself. On a day that you've spent hours and hours sitting in front of a gadget with your whole being poured into a screen, or you've sat in a little cubicle with artificial temperature, and there is no horizon for your eyes to meet, there's a good chance that on that day, you're not very embodied. And that's when you're going to walk past that cigarette tapri and buy a cigarette. And you're going to take in that deep breath that you need, but you're going to do it in a carcinogenic form. Or you're going to scroll online and just spontaneously buy those shoes, which you may or may not need, those shoes that will end up someday in a landfill. Or you are going to crave some yummy, thrilling taste on your tongue, and you're going to order some junk food, which is going to come in a packet, that's going to end up in the ocean, and that's going to give you some calories to worry about later, right? Now, my big trap is sugar, and I do this all the time. We spend so much money for that thrill, that confidence that the shoes gave, or that pause that the breath gave. On a day that I'm a little bit embodied, though, is the day that I might choose instead to do a yoga practice, or to cook a meal, take a nap, to go for a walk in the park, or to call an old friend and reinforce the connection I have with them. And so all of these choices have safeguarded not just the health of my body, but the health of this larger body, this planet, our home. Coming back to embodiment being this prerequisite for intimacy, the day you choose to go to the park is the day you choose to spend time with the trees. And when you're with the trees, you will notice these millions of little creatures that the trees support. And the information will be reinforced to you that bodies need other bodies. You will feel the aliveness of the tree, and this will make it a little harder to cut up that tree and sell it as furniture. This is the day I will look at a mountain and feel its spirit, and it becomes a little harder for me to chop up that mountain and sell it as tiles to be used in our homes. Now, this being present with nature, this intimacy with nature, at a micro level already destabilizes our learned separation from nature. And this learned separation, as you just saw, is what commodification thrives on. And this intimacy, just being in a park and being with those trees, far surpasses just human connection. It's planetary, and if we allow it, it can be interspecies. In this example, it is an invitation to say no to the ruthless buying. In a time of very dark binaries and separations among us, gender discriminations, caste discriminations, religious, linguistic, global north and south, you name it, we are being asked to separate. In such a time, the body becomes an important tool for non-separation. In fact, I would say it becomes a site for the integration of worlds of opposing ideas. I'm going to give you the example of the skin. Notice how comfortably the skin is able to have multiple experiences. In my project Rorschach Touch, we created tools and mediums via which people could reach into their deepest touch memories from working with the skin. What we know is that the skin is somewhat the first sense organ. It develops when we are inside our mother's womb, floating in that amniotic fluid. And every time you float in water, that feeling is recalled, even if you don't think about it consciously. This skin is the interface where the baby first encounters the distinction between self and other. When you enter the room, I look at you and I define you, and you do the same with me. Everything inside that bag of skin is you, and everything outside is the world or is other. But look at the paradox. As you sit here in this chair, you know that your skin is your boundary between you and the world, right? You are inside, the world is outside. But as you sit here, your skin is telling you the temperature of the room. It's telling you how much light is on you. It's telling you if you're feeling dry and you need to hydrate, if you're feeling cold and you need to put on a jacket. So you are in the world via the skin. The skin is my container, but also my connector. The skin is my boundary, but also my bridge via which I am in the world. And look how easily the body is able to hold those realities without a big fight or without thinking about it. And this is why I come back to embodied practice, particularly intimacy, as a tool for resistance. Now, here we are compelled to constantly declare I'm pro or I'm against. I'm north or I'm south. I'm this or I'm that. In a moment like this, the body speaks the language of and. I'm really nervous to be standing here, and I'm so excited to share with you my work. I'm really irritated by my sibling all the time, and I love her forever. The language of and. Now, we discovered that through our work and our workshops, that the skin is like an archive, an encyclopedia of the life lived. Every single scratch, surgery scar, bruise, tattoo, pimple, beauty spot has a story behind it. I'm going to ask you to take a little moment and think of a mark on your skin. Yeah, do it as we are sitting here. Think of a mark on your skin. It could be a wrinkle that you just noticed, a cut, a tattoo, and take a moment to remember how that happened to you, the memory of the story of how it got there in the first place. Yeah? So as you remember this little story of how your skin acquired this mark, notice how you're so present. If I come and pinch you right now, you'll be very present. No, you're right here. But at the same time, you're deeply connected to your past. The skin is able to be past and present. Having said this, intimacy is not just about touch, and touch is not just about romance. Even though Bollywood would like us to believe this, I'm noticing constantly how the media sort of hijacks intimacy. If you look at commercial cinema, you'll see often two kinds of touch, right? You'll see the violent dishum dishum kind of touch, and you will see this aankhon mein aankhein dekhna, very aggressive checking out strategy, right? Now you guys are mainly the Instagram generation. Sorry if you don't like that term. But if I walk in here and I look at you like this, immediately you'll be like, #creepy, ayo, don't want, isn't it? So, of course that eyes getting locked happens, that heart racing happens, the electricity in the room happens, but it's so nuanced, it's so subtle. It's not boom, boom, zoom, zoom, like how they show it on screen. So, if you, and we are kind of so disembodied these days with our gadgets and our life, that we sometimes can't even feel what's happening with our own heartbeat or skin. And if you lose connection with this, which is your interface, the space where you learn boundaries, where you learn pleasure, where you learn consent, you can't feel into your own body, then how on earth are you expected to feel into the thoughts, the sensations, the pleasure, the consent of another body. And wouldn't you say that at a time of huge violence against women and queer people, that it is a big act of political allyship to actually prioritize being sensitive to someone else's pleasure, comfort, discomfort, or consent? It's not always about protesting or posting online. All of that comes, but that's the outward part. First, my question is, what is the inward service you're willing to do in your body in order to be an ally? Now, intimacy is manifest in so many things: in a high five, in shared coffee or chai, in solidarity, in locker room banter, in shared fascination. And the body remembers intimacy, it remembers touch, but it also remembers the lack of touch. It remembers danger and it remembers unsafety. Every instruction that you've been given, don't talk to strangers, be careful when the auto drops you, no? Don't let it drop you outside your door. Make sure your phone is fully charged. All of those instructions, what are you wearing? Check what you're wearing before you leave the house. They sit in our body. This fight or flight, this ninja mode sits in our body. And this fear, as history students know, is what every leader or dictator has used across time to create the evil other, to divide and rule, to drive a wedge between us. And every act of separation in the human community, whether it's minority hating, or whether it's gentricide, or gentrification, or genocide, or casteism, has this fear-mongering at the root of it. So in this environment of mad separation and binary sort of enforcement, I started to think about how if I could create a performance that allowed people to feel their own body, their own sensations, or a workshop where people could be vulnerable in each other's presence and really acknowledge that you're as fragile as me, you're not out to get me. If I could do that, this itself could be a political act. This itself could be an act of resistance. And that's when I decided that intimacy would be my tool of resistance. And you know, again and again, from our audiences and workshop participants, I encounter this yearning for intimacy with a stranger. And this sounds very risky and adventurous, which is great, but this is not about that. Because in the face of that constant ninja mode, when you connect with a stranger, when you have compassion, laughter, kindness from a stranger, it reinforces to you that the world is a safe space. I don't know if it is, but it's just a much nicer feeling to be carrying around in your nervous system. I'm going to start wrapping up by talking about strange intimacies. About 2.5 hour solo performative event that I curated when I realized that people were yearning for intimacy with a stranger. The first thing that I do, this is between me and anybody who signs up. The rule is they have to be a stranger, so my friends can't come and do it. The first thing I do when I do strange intimacies is try to create a safe and non-judgmental space. And one of the acts I do is that I write the participant a letter that is so personal that I don't even want my mom or my best friend or my partner to read it. And by doing this, I dismantle the hierarchy of power that I hold as a performer. I try and become more vulnerable to them. There are a bunch of other things that happen which I can't share with you because it's really in a personal space. But I will end with this anecdote. In 2020, a young man signed up for a strange intimacy session. This was before the pandemic. He came in for the session and we had a very special session. I remember him, his story, his obstacles, his presence, and I very clearly remember his touch because he made me feel so safe. Months later, in the middle of the pandemic, I receive an email from him. And the email reads, the title reads, "From an old friend." He's very grateful. He thanks me for this non-judgmental, safe space that we were able to experience together. He says it was cathartic, and he even talks about certain shifts that have occurred in his life. I'm very excited and happy to receive the mail, and I replied to him very enthusiastically. 3.5 years later, a few months ago, I learned from Facebook that this young man has been killed in a tragic accident. I delve into Facebook, and through these Facebook trails, I find that his sister is well known to me for many years. I had no clue. This was a completely bizarre coincidence. I immediately go back to the inbox, start reading the mail, and I notice to my horror that he's actually sent me another email, a second email, which I didn't know happened because I was too hectic with the pandemic. And this mail is even more poetic. It talks about how he's dealing with the lockdowns and how he started to connect with trees, that interspecies connection that I was talking about, in a very special way. He even sends a photograph of his favorite tree and its exact location. I am besides myself with grief, and I'm sitting there in tears, feeling guilt, and I have to school myself into how can I practice intimacy even now? How can I treat him as if he were my own? Over the next few weeks and months, I watch as his sister unravels on social media, sharing her grief, sharing the family's devastation. And I start to realize that this second email was in a way a gift from him through me to his sister. And I dream of a moment when I will take his sister to his favorite tree. And the hope is that in that moment, his blood relative, his favorite tree, and this stranger who he allowed to watch him, to see him, to really see him for a brief moment, when we come together in his honor, that for just a minuscule second we are able to touch him again, to touch this person who has moved far beyond the skin. And this is the story of how strange intimacies can bring to you personal quantum moments that you couldn't have even imagined. I want to end by saying thank you to you all for listening. I want to wish you the deepest and the strangest of intimacies, and I want to wish us all embodiment. Thank you.